Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of 365 Days of Gaming. I really appreciate you taking our time to check out this video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Never required, always appreciated, so thank you in advance. Now for today's game, we're talking about a PlayStation platforming classic from a classic series. We're talking about Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. Now if you never watched any of these videos, I'm going to give you a quick background. So I didn't own a Nintendo 64 during this time. I owned a PlayStation, so I had to go elsewhere for some of my platforming fixes. This is why I wanted to highlight Crash 3. Also, let me give a shout out to my cousin Jonathan for putting me on to the Crash Bandicoot series. Now I played the first Crash, and I played a little bit of the second Crash, but it wasn't really high on my list of platforming games. It wasn't bad, but couldn't really match the power of Mario back then. But when Crash 3 came out and my cousin was like, yo, you got to play this one, like this is it, they figured it out, tried it out, and I was hooked. Like, one of the things I love is the variety per level. So every level you go to, yeah, there are going to be some similarities. Some of them are, straightforward platforming. Some of them are chase ones. Some of them are races. But it's the pacing and the variety and the different characters and a lot of the presentation that makes Crash 3 so good. I felt like this is when they finally figured out everything about the series. It had like its own identity complete, base of the story, not to go too far into it, but Crash Bandicoot is the main character. His evil nemesis is the Dr. Cortex. And each of the games, there's some reason why Crash is going against him, because this dude is trying to take over the world and do bad stuff. Crash got to put a stop to that. So this is another entry in that. But then you have a lot of the characters. Some of them are recurring characters that appeared in other series, well, other Crash games, I should say. But it's really cool, especially during that time where, the voice acting and a lot of that stuff, which, now is standard, it was not back then. And Crash having that type of presentation was really cool and just kind of kept you more immersed into the world and kept you going. Now, the game isn't one of the most difficult, even though you're going to see me die a bunch of times. But it's enough to keep you, engaged in it, no pun intended. And, I like the game because the visuals, especially for its time, were great. It passes the can I tell what everything is test. It passes it very well. And also there's a lot of replayability. So in order to 100%, each level, you have to explode every single box. You have to make sure you collect any collectibles in that level, which it'll tell you. But then you also have to go back and do a time trial, which I tried a little bit of just to give you an example of, but I'm not, I'm not the speed running type. So I was like, not for me. But I remember back in the day, me and my cousin, passing the controller back and forth trying to get every single collectible. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that we did, but if not, there's no way for you to disprove my statement. So, I did it 100% the game. You can't prove I didn't. But no, I like the fact that, you have the chase sequences and they do it from both angles. So you're not just doing one of these moving forward from over the shoulder every single time. You got stages where you can see, you're running from the front, which can be very tricky if you don't know what you're doing, right? Then you got your underwater levels, levels that have some sort of different way you have to progress. You're not just running, from behind and trying to get through the level that way. There's always little secrets and stuff that you can find, little unlocks. You can go, vehicles. You're riding different things, whether you're playing Coco and you're riding the tiger, or you got some sort of aquatic vehicle. And you really need to use all of those tools if you're trying to 100% the game. But it's not necessary if you're just trying to enjoy it. You can pretty much beat, most levels just by going straight or going from left to right, or however the level presents itself. But they do a lot of camera tricks where they'll change, which way Crash is facing, or sometimes you're coming towards the screen rather away. And I think those are little smart design choices that make the game cooler, give it a more complete feel. So I really like this game, and this especially this one in this series. I always thought Crash was solid. Like I said, not the greatest, but definitely not the worst. I kind of held it in that Rayman tier, where it's like, all right, you're not a AAA platformer, but you're definitely you're a solid B+. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I know people, when you don't tell them that a series that they likes is A+ or one of the best ever, they kind of make you feel a certain way. But I feel like it's still, Crash is always gonna be having a solid place in the video game history books. And they recently did the Crash 4, which I hadn't had a chance to check out, but playing 3 makes me want to go ahead and give that a shot. So who knows, that may end up cracking this list sometime later in the future. Yeah, the difficulty, I will say it's one of those games where it's tricky difficult. It's not necessarily hard, and you do get a lot of lives if you collect the Wampa fruit. So every time you get 100 fruit, you get another life, and you can burn through them if you're being a little reckless, like you see me doing it several times throughout this video. But also, I mean, you can end up having a whole bunch of lives left over. So it's one of those things where the game is trying to make sure that you have every opportunity to beat it, versus trying to stop you from beating it, which I feel like sometimes some of the older games, they were trying to stop you from beating the game. I mean, which is cool, but not everything needs to be, cheap. And I don't feel like anything in Crash is cheap. A lot of times it's just a little trial and error, learning, where certain things are coming from or what you need to do in order to progress through it better. The other thing I think is really cool about the presentation of this game is a lot of times before levels, you will get some sort of cutscene with, one of the characters, or a couple of characters in some cases, talking to you about what's going on in the game. And again, that's one of those immersion techniques, things that just keep you engrossed in what you're doing and keep your attention span, focused on the game. And I really like that. Those are just things that I think, should be standard at this point. But like I said, back then, definitely not something that you could expect from every single game you played. I wanted to show you a couple of different areas, and most of the game that I show you is actually taking place in the first world. So the variety of levels and the things you do, happen in the first couple worlds. And if I'm not mistaken, there's 6 worlds total. So each of them have, at least 5 stages, if not 5 plus a boss stage, which is really cool. The bosses aren't necessarily the hardest, but also they're not a pushover. You have to figure out what the pattern is. Half the time they beat themselves, which is always funny. But again, that kind of plays into what Crash Bandicoot represented. It wasn't supposed to be the most serious game. It was, have a level of comedy in it, especially when you die. If you notice all the different death animations I went through, I don't think any of the animations were the same, if I'm not mistaken, which is another testament to the amount of design this game has in it. Now, I know a bunch of you have played Crash Bandicoot. Don't even play with me and act like you haven't. You're not too good for Crash Bandicoot, especially during those days. He was out here, you know what I'm saying? He was everywhere. Every game coming out was greatest hits, so he was moving units. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on Crash Bandicoot, especially the third one, but also if you have thoughts on the series as a whole. Love to hear what you think about that, and I appreciate all the comments and all the feedback that you all give. It always makes me feel a little bit more warm inside, knowing that you're paying attention and you're giving me some feedback to work with. But as always, have fun, be safe,